I'm going to show you how to replace some tie rod ends. I'm doing it specifically on a Jaguar XK8, but this works for pretty much any car. They're all about the same. On my car, here's the tools I need. I need a 19 millimeter wrench, a 22 millimeter, and I also need a second 22 millimeter, which I don't have, but a 7/8 fits. Also, you need a bottle jack like this, and then you'll need a tool for removing the top of the tie rod ends out of the little socket that they're in. This is one, you can get it at Harbor Freight for about $10, maybe $15. There's also this kind. I see these at auto parts places all the time. I don't like these as much. This is $5 or $10 at an auto parts place. But I don't think they work as well, but it'll work if this is all you can get. And also you'll need your new tie rod end. Okay, the first thing to do obviously is get the car jacked up, get it on some jack stands so it's safe. You don't want to be working on it while it's just on the jack. So I've got it jacked up. I turn the steering wheel all the way to the right because I'm working on the left front wheel here, and your tie rods are only on the front wheels. So I'm on the left front wheel, and this is your tie rod right here, and this is the tie rod end. This has a little ball joint in it, and sometimes these ball joints get worn out and your steering gets a little bit sloppy. So I'm going to take this tie rod end off and replace it with this new one that I've got over here. The first thing to do is, oh, you know what, one thing I forgot to show you was some penetrating oil. You want to spray some penetrating oil on this nut right here because this nut gets kind of corroded in there, and by spraying some penetrating oil on it, letting it sit for a while, it'll be easier to remove. So let me go do that. So this is what I use. It's just liquid wrench penetrating oil. It helps the nut get loose on the first try here. So now I've let the penetrating oil soak in for a few minutes, and the thing to do is take your two wrenches. One of them will go right here on the actual tie rod end itself, and the other one will go on the nut that's holding the tie rod end in place. And the nut needs to go, let me see, looking at it from above, it needs to go it needs to go that direction, and I need to be lifting up on the other wrench and kind of pulling them together like this, and hopefully it'll break free easily. And did it? I don't think it did. I think it slipped off. No, but it's free. It's moving around. Okay, now once it's loose, you don't want to let this nut move out any further because, in fact, you want to tighten it back down just finger tight, because when you put the new tie rod end in, you want to tighten it up so it lines up right with where the nut is. So you want to make sure this nut stays right where it is. When you're all done, you're going to have to go get an alignment anyway. But by screwing the new tie rod end to the same point where that nut is set, you'll be pretty close and you won't do any damage to your tire driving to the tire store. All right, next you got to take off this nut that's on top of the little ball joint on the tie rod end, and it's pretty snug, but a little bit of penetrating oil helps it. And now I'll just finish loosening it up, and then the tie rod end itself is in there really tight, and that's what we need those big tools for, is to break them free. Now that the nut's off, what I need to do is take one of these removal tools. This one right here, I don't even know if this is the right size. There's a specific size, but you'd slide it in here and start wedging it back and forth and hammering on it. This one I think is actually too big. That's why I'm not going to use it. And if you want to use one of this kind, this one is a, what size is this? It doesn't even say on it. Whatever size it is, it's too big. The kind I prefer to use is this one right here. What this does, you slide this over the tie rod end bolt just like that. It'll slide in there, and then once it's in, you start tightening up this nut or this bolt, and it'll put pressure by spreading apart this end. It squeezes this end together. It'll put pressure on the end of that bolt, and so now, what size is it? 19 fits. So I just start torquing down on it until it pops off. And when it pops off, it's going to make a loud bang. And in fact, when it gets close, when I can tell there's a lot of pressure on there, I kind of want to hold my hand into this because I don't really want it falling down. Because if this just drops down, it could damage the other end of the tie rod. I don't want it to do that. But I'm nowhere near there yet. Oh, look at that, it just fell right out. The other side, it took a whole lot of effort. I'm surprised this one came out so easy. In fact, I wonder if this was what my problem was all along. I've got some vibration in my steering wheel, and that's what I'm trying to fix. Anyway, yeah, so that popped out real easy. The other one, I swear, it probably took 200 foot-pounds of force on the wrench to get it to pop loose. And when it did, it popped loose with a really loud bang. Anyway, so here this is. This is off there. I can just twist this off. I want to keep that nut in place. And actually, I'm gonna have to put a wrench on there to hold that because this is pretty tight. Well, it's kind of funny. I didn't have this problem on the other side. On the other side, the tie rod end just twisted right off. On this side of the car, it doesn't want to come off. It's like it's welded in place. It's not really welded, it's just rusted in place. So the thing to do though, I've already sprayed, so I loosened up that nut and I sprayed some penetrating oil down in there to help loosen this. Before I take it off, I'm going to screw the nut back down. I'm going to screw the nut back down to where it was so I know how far to screw on the new tie rod end. But the thing to do is just use a wrench and another wrench. This tie rod right here, that's a 13 millimeter. And so you want to put pressure on there with the two wrenches. You don't want to just try to twist on the tie rod end because if you do that, it'll mess up the other end of the tie rod end up inside that boot. So once I've given the penetrating oil some time to penetrate, I'm going to try to loosen this thing up again. Well, as you can see by the angle of the sun, it's much later. This tie rod end has fought me every inch of the way trying to get it removed. At one point I was going to take off the inner tie rod end, and anyway, it's finally coming out now. Let me put the wrench back on there. It's finally coming out, but it's still really tight. I'm able to get it with my hand now. But this is what you do. The other one came out, literally, I mean, I was just able to spin it right off. But this one has been fighting me the whole way. So, anyway, that's off. That's the old tie rod end. And now, I definitely need an alignment now, that's for sure. Now I just take my new tie rod end and I screw it on until it ends up. You know what, I'm going to spray just a little bit of oil on there too. Just to, hopefully next time this has to come off, it won't be so tight. I screw it back on to the same spot where that nut is, and that should get my alignment pretty close. And I'll go get an alignment tomorrow, or maybe even this evening if I get done here in time. So now that that's on there, I need to tighten that up. Where are my wrenches? 22. So I tighten that up, and I'm going to get it even tighter once I get it in here. But now that it's in there, let me take this off. I used some wire to hold this thing out of the way. Okay, so I guide that up in there. And now that it's up in there, this is where the jack is going to come in handy. Because when I put this nut on, when I start tightening it down, there's going to get to a point where the nut is just going to want to spin on the shaft. Actually, the shaft is going to want to spin where the nut is. So by taking the jack and putting the jack underneath the tie rod here, or the tie rod end, I'm just going to put a little bit of upward pressure on there. Not too much, but just get it seated. There we go. It's just a tiny bit of pressure. Now the little tapered joint there, the the thing, the taper that goes into this right here, it's seated really well. And now I can tighten down that nut the rest of the way without the taper turning. Okay, and now I'm just wrapping up. I tightened that nut back up after I got everything in place here. This nut is good and tight. Everything is good. I do need an alignment now because I fiddled with the suspension components. But that's what I'll do. I'll go get an alignment after I put the wheels back on, and everything should be good to go.